you should be maybe just slightly overbuilt. A little bit, just a little bit bigger than your final crown's going to be. Most of the occlusal surface is going to be built with OE4. You can complicate this quite a bit by adding different porcelains on the occlusal table, and I just don't want to get too far into that on this case. The thing that you want to remember with building the occlusal table is the closer you get to the cusp tips, the higher value porcelain you should use. So as you get closer to the central dissectional groove and deeper into the fosses, you need to use more translucent porcelains and porcelains with more color. So the porcelains that have more translucency and more color would be TI3 would be a good porcelain to use in the central, towards that central dissectional groove. Cervical enamel khaki, or cervical translucent khaki, cervical translucent yellow, depending on the shade. So as I build, the cusp tips are going to be high value. As I get closer to the central dissectional groove, I get more and more translucent and use porcelains with more color. Make sense? There's a couple different ways to build posterior anatomy, and one is that you would go in and on your first bake, and I actually build it this way a lot of times, just build primary planes. Don't worry about a lot of detailed anatomy. A lot of times it's going to shrink and move anyway. And then the way we're going to do it this time is we're going to try to build everything as close as we can to where we want it. Just overbuild it a little bit. And you guys will have to just figure out which technique is going to work best for you. Contrasting porcelains and enamels become really important if you don't have a lot of room. Typical posterior crown, you're not going to get as much room as you'd like to do the anatomy you want. And so you have to use high and low value porcelains, translucent and highly reflective porcelains to give the effect of depth on your occlusal surface. If everything is the same porcelain, it's going to look very flat and very washed out. But if you can use those to highlight ridges and lobes and the fossa pits, it'll give it a three-dimensional look, and it'll look like it has more anatomy than it actually does. They'll look a lot nicer. You've got to have a brush with a good point, with a good tip. If you don't, you'll have a really difficult time stacking posterior anatomy. All of your primary ridges and lobes are going to have secondary supporting lobes. They don't all have to be the same size. Natural teeth are not going to be completely symmetrical all the time. Everything's not going to be textbook PTC. And the thing to remember is if it's really messy when you put it into the oven, it's going to be messy when it comes out. So define everything as well as you can before it goes into the oven. You can take a blade or endophile. There's lots of different tools you can use at this point if you want to go in and open up some of the anatomy. You want to be really careful that you don't just go in there and start cutting, because it's going to separate and cause problems for you. Okay. Should be just a little bit bigger than you want your final crown to be. deep dent or a modified dent in these areas. Modify it with some Essence porcelain, some Essence stain. We've done just some minor contact adjustments on this. And now we're going to go in and just smooth up the surface of everything. Now we're going to go in with a high-speed burr. You want to be careful using high-speed burrs on porcelain. They can generate quite a bit of heat, can crack the porcelain, you can set up fractures if you're not really careful. So this right here is a pointy carbide burr, very sharp. You can buy them, some of them are you can buy this way. This one's actually been shaved down with a diamond disc so that it doesn't, right at the tip, it doesn't have any edges on it. There we go. It's rounded. You don't want to go in and just start carving this out. You don't want to carve the anatomy. All the anatomy is already there. All we're doing is just cleaning out the porcelain and some of the pits. Okay, now let's steam this off and go on to the next bit.